The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
We continue to follow that breaking news this morning out of St. Mary's County. School officials there have confirmed that there was a shooting this morning at Great Mills High School. A statement from St. Mary's School says the school is on lockdown and the event is contained.
That was local reporting from Denise Koch and CBS 13 in Baltimore. There has been another school shooting today, March 20th, 2018, at a St. Mary's County Public School, Great Mills High School. The shooter is dead and 2 people are injured, according to Mike Helgren, who is a reporter for WJZ at CBS 13 locally. He tweeted out, quote, shooter, a student fired at female student. School resource officer responded immediately. And again, that individual is dead. 2 are injured. The sad irony of this is, or tragic irony of this, is that just last week, this school participated in the walkout, the Never Again walkout, in hopes that something like this would not happen. And yet just a week later, here we are, and students are less than a week later. Students are being evacuated and locked down, and parents are picking up their children. 1 is dead and 2 are injured. We don't have much more information on the status of the people who have been injured, but it was a school resource officer who went on the scene and immediately secured the premises, the school. And as I was listening to commentary this morning from the local stations there in Baltimore, they were quick to make the juxtaposition, or the comparison rather, between this school resource officer and the one in Parkland, Florida, that did not go into the school. And sadly, I think I said this a month ago while we were on Like It or Not. I said that we'll have, sadly, an opportunity to see how the next school resource officer reacts, because this happens in America. This is a part of our American culture. And, sadly, a combination of whatever issues the individual goes through, but also the ease with which they can get weapons. See, I mean, I can't not talk about the politics, because that's at the core of it. Conservatives, Republicans would want us to discuss this from an individualistic perspective, talking about the problems of the individual shooter, right? And how that's the angle that we need to address, because then they boil it down to some failings either in that individual shooter or that individual shooter's family, but they'll never look at the systemic failings that contribute to whatever that student is going to. But more importantly, not only more importantly, but a sidestep, we will never be able to adjust our society for all of the individual idiosyncrasies, individual problems, individual issues that everyone has. And if we try to make that the only thing that we address, then what are we honestly expecting society to do? To try to find, out of 330 million people, try to find the people who might potentially have emotional problems and be angry enough to kill people? That either becomes like searching for a needle in a haystack, or that creates the perfect conditions for everyone to be a big brother to everyone else. Either way, it's not a tenable solution. We can't fix this problem by trying to fix every individual in society. But what we can do is make sure that if that individual wants to purchase a gun, we can take them through a far more rigorous screening than we currently do. That is the real solution. But back to the story at hand. 1 student is dead. The shooter is dead. Two other individuals are injured. The student showed up and fired on another student, a female student. And here we are again with another school shooting. Let's take a listen into one of the students as he was interviewed by CNN during lockdown.
And we've been on lockdown for about 30 minutes or so. Supposedly I heard about a couple of people got shot, about 7 or so. And one person supposedly dead, what I've heard. It first started off, I heard that someone put a gun against their head, and it's pretty much mainly all I know at the moment. I'm still a little shaken up by it even happening. I didn't think it would really happen.
It's awfully hard to hear the student say he didn't really believe that it could happen because of the reality that it is happening, and it's happening more and more and more. And the reality is that students have to take this far more seriously. Parents have to take this as a reality. And while it may not be something that happens every single day, right? It's the idea of sending your children to school, trusting that they would come home safely. And then that, in any case, with any frequency, right? If it happens once, that should be one time too many, because there's an entire group of families now whose children won't come home. Thankfully, the only person killed this morning, which is still tragic, but thankfully it was only the shooter who was killed this morning. This story could have ended very differently had it not been for the school resource officer. But the other thing I want to talk about in that clip, which really stands out to me, is the willingness of media to talk to these kids right in the moment. I mean, come on, can we get any more disaster voyeurism? It's like disaster porn, live webcams, it's not good enough to catch the excitement afterwards. It's like something about them catching it live. I didn't play the entire clip, but he couldn't even get the guy's name right in this. Called him Matthew. His name was Jonathan, or vice versa. And the kid was still on lockdown. I'm like, for the love of God, he didn't even ask him, are you safe? At least not in the clip that was uploaded. But this is the new journalism. But back to the issue at hand is the fact that this happens because, yes, we have a broken society. I think anyone in their right mind can look at our society and say that we have some really deeply rooted problems that every individual can either experience, could be potentially vulnerable to. We have this many people. You have 330 million people in this country. You're going to have a certain subset that commit these types of violent acts, right? But it can't be that we just accept that as normal simply because it's becoming normal. We have to do something about it. We have to. And for our sake, I hope that we do something about it before it hits too close to home.
FBI officials confirming to CNN this morning that they, quote, suspect that the explosion at this FedEx facility in the town of Schertz, Texas, which is a suburb of northern San Antonio. So it's about an hour's drive here from the city of Austin to get down to that area. But that is where investigators are turning their attention to this morning after some kind of explosion at the package facility there at the FedEx in the town of Schertz, Texas. At this point, FBI officials saying they suspect it is connected to the 4 explosions that they're already investigating here.
That was the voice of Ed Lavandera reporting locally for CNN, reporting about the 5th bombing now in just 19 days. This bombing took place just outside of the city of Austin, Texas, as you heard in the reporting. This bombing took place at a FedEx facility, and this is now being considered, obviously, as a serial bomber. These last 2 bombings have been uniquely different than the previous bombings, the one that killed 17-year-old Draylon Mason and the one that killed 39-year-old Anthony House, 2 black men, one of a young black man. Those were package bombs that were left at their front doors. The last 2 bombs, the one today at the FedEx facility, was being delivered to Austin, Texas, and it went off. And the bombing on yesterday, which injured 2 men, was a tripwire bomb. And so investigators are considering the possibility that all of these are connected, but the MO for each of them, for at least the last 2, has changed. Let's take a listen into the police chief there in Austin as he describes this.
We are clearly dealing with what we expect to be a serial bomber at this point.
And the police chief made a plea directly to the bomber.
We want to understand what brought you to this point, and we want to listen to you.
NBC News did an interview with two FBI experts, one a former FBI agent and one a former profiler, and they described the change in the bombing so far and the type of escalation that's occurring and what this bomber may be thinking at this point. And I thought it was important for you to hear this.
The bomber's progressing. He's feeling extremely powerful now. He's got the city on edge.
With this tripwire, this changes things. It's more sophisticated. It's not targeted to individuals.
And that reporting was as of yesterday. And as of today, we see even now another method is being used by either the bomber or a copycat bomber. But in this case, they are sending it through the mail. The previous bombs were not sent through the mail. They were delivered. And here we are. So this is a serial bomber, and it looks as though the primary targets initially were people of color, black people, prominent members of the community and the black community there in Austin, Texas. And on this side of the equation, we're not hearing anything. And by this side, I mean the political side of the conversation. We've yet to hear anything from the president of the United States about these bombings that have now killed two, injured multiple people, that have used every means of delivery. I mean, this is a serial bomber, and yet nothing from the president. There's a good tweet from an individual, Dave Weaver, on Twitter, and just another guy. But, you know, that's a good thing about Twitter. You know, you don't have to be anybody special to say something important. And he actually made a good observation. He said, the number of times in the last 10 days real Donald Trump mentioned Democrats 18, Hillary 6, collusion 4, Mueller 2. The number of times he's mentioned Austin or bombs or terrorist or terrorism or racism or racist, 0. Last night was the 5th bomb. Hello. And this is true. And, you know, Donald Trump is not ashamed of showing where he's concerned about things, or even more importantly, he's not ashamed of showing a lack of interest in a particular topic. And, you know, had this obvious, you probably can finish my sentence at this point, but had this been fill in the blank, someone who is Muslim or someone of Middle Eastern, North African descent, basically someone who looks Muslim, if this in any way, form, or fashion could have been spun to carry out his Muslim ban, or to carry out his desire to build a wall, if it had been useful in any way possible for his agenda, he would have spoken about it relentlessly. But unfortunately for the families and the victims and the people of Austin, Texas, this doesn't fit into, this does not neatly comport into the president's political agenda. So he's yet to say anything. But according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was on Fox today, she said that the president is aware of the bombings. Right. It's a shame that we have to ask that question. Does the president even know what's going on? Because if they don't cover it on Fox News, then, well, I digress. But according to the Associated Press, quote, spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee Sanders tells Fox News Channel that President Donald Trump is aware of the situation. Sanders says federal authorities are working closely with local authorities and have offered their full support and cooperation to make sure we're doing whatever is necessary and whatever is possible to stop the explosions and to find whomever is responsible. So the staff of the White House is making sure that they can at least answer those types of questions and make it sound as though they're doing something. But the president, who's very vocal and has never needed the aid of his staff to answer these types of questions, well, he's silent on the issue. So we're going to take a quick break from the news for a minute because I just want to applaud my audience, my patrons. You all are amazing. We are already making a lot of moves towards hitting our new goal, but I have to stop and thank Lorena H for becoming a new patron. Inti E for becoming a new patron. And I want to thank Rodney, Benjamin, Ryan, and Kristopher, all who are patrons currently, and they increased their pledges to help us meet our goal. And that goal, quite simply, is the cost of renting the facilities for us to create and produce video. If you help us secure that facility, then we can get in there and we can create amazing content, not only for the Benjamin Dixon Show, but also for Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon and Rebecca Azor, my co-anchor. We're going at this alone, independently, separate from empty promises and well, let's put it like this way. We have an amazing story to tell, and by you becoming a patron, if we can get 50 patrons, $10 a month, you would help us tell this story. It's not really that big of a goal, right? It's not even that ambitious. So let's do that today. And I won't do like NPR and keep talking about it in the same episode over and over and over again. At least not this episode. Maybe tomorrow. But for now, let's get back to today's news. So in light of the shooting this morning in Maryland, I wanted to talk more about the upcoming March for Our Lives, march across the country that's happening this Saturday. And I hope that you would go. I have a link in the description. I hope that you would go and participate in whatever city you're in. But there's a clip from CBS, the online show, that David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez, two young people of whom I'm significantly a fan, discussing two things: death threats that they're getting. These children who already are survivors of the Parkland shooting, they're getting death threats from people who disagree with their politics, and their politics are really nothing more than to make sure that this never happens again. And the relationship with the NRA, and how the NRA has treated them now that the two of them, along with the their other colleagues, have become some of the strongest voices against the NRA. Let's listen to the first clip as Emma describes how she's handling the fact that she's getting death threats. You heard right, death threats.
There's always been people who are going to want to harm us. There's always been people who are going to want to harm me. Like, even before this, I'm not going to pretend that this, like, opened my eyes to a cruel and harmful world. Like, we already knew that this world was going to be tough, so getting death threats like that doesn't really faze us.
You know, I'm simultaneously impressed with Emma, but also sad for Emma, because she's having to demonstrate this magnanimity, and she's doing it based on the fact that she is a child who's getting death threats. You know, I don't envy her in any sense, in any way imaginable, because she's a child. They are all children who are simply just doing and coping with this tragedy the best way they know how, and they're getting death threats. Now, I've gotten death threats doing this, but, you know, the larger the audience, the more frequent you get death threats. I'm quite sure she's getting them. They're getting them all day, every day, because apparently that's what we do in our society. This is not a conservative phenomenon. This is not a liberal phenomenon. Both sides do it. And this, however, this next section is unique to the conservative side of the spectrum because of the NRA. Listen to David Hogg as he describes the manner in which the NRA puts this type of vitriol and venom into the conversation, even towards teenagers who are the survivors of this type of tragedy.
I think it just goes to prove exactly what they are. I don't think NRA members are bad people at all. Yeah. I think they're responsible gun owners that want to become politically active and make their voices heard in this democracy, and I think that's an excellent thing. I think the problem comes in when it's people at the top of this organization that don't listen to their constituents and continue to scare people into buying more guns, creating more violence so they can scare more people and sell more guns. The people at the top of the NRA are no longer working for the people that are in their organization. They're working on behalf of the gun lobby. Mm-hmm.
And with clearness of perception, David Hogg, with precision, correctly defines the motivations and the loyalties of the NRA. And with that type of clear communication and refusal to equivocate, of course, the NRA is going to see this young man as probably public enemy number one. And this is how he and Emma describe their interactions with the NRA directly.
On hall meeting that you guys participated in, but has the organization been reaching out to you guys?
The way that they've been reaching out to us is basically threatening us.
They've been instigating things, and then when we reply, they like shy back away. Like they can dish it out, but they can't take it. Right. You know?
And there you have it. Emma Gonzalez and David Hogg. Go to marchforourlives.org. The link is in the description. Register, go out, support, because what else are these kids supposed to do with this tragedy? I mean, you know, just to put it in perspective, when my father passed, the way I coped with it was to intentionally try to do something positive that I would not have done if my dad was still living. You know, it may not make sense to anybody else, but to me, it was like, if I can do something positive with my life that I would not have done if my father was still living, then it would make his death more bearable. So perhaps this is why I understand exactly what they're doing. But I was 25 when my dad died. These kids are 17, getting ready to turn 18. But still, the concept is the same. What else are they supposed to do with this tragedy but to do something so amazing because of the tragedy that, you know, it doesn't bring back their friends. It doesn't bring anyone back to life. My dad is still gone, but I just found that to be the way that I cope with it. And this is, I think, conceptually, this is what they're doing. So I perfectly understand. And not only do I understand their methodology of healing, but I also understand the significance of what they're fighting, because the NRA is a terrorist organization that uses fear and intimidation to get their political agenda accomplished. And it is taking children, Generation Z-ers, I guess. Is that what we call them? Can somebody... Generation Zers? Generation Z, we need them to lead the charge where we've fallen short. And the way we can support them is to get behind them. And this Saturday, the 24th, I know where I will be. Hopefully you'll be there too.
Tonight, we're going to take a hard look at why over the last 40 years, the middle class of this country has declined while oligarchy is on the rise. And why during those 40 years, over $13 trillion in wealth has been transferred from the bottom 99% to the top 1%.
You know, here's something that is true. No matter how many times I hear Bernie Sanders talk that, I never get tired of hearing him talk about it, because it's the truth. And you know what else? This was last night, a panel on income inequality with Elizabeth Warren and Michael Moore. But you know what else is true? People are not, in general, are not tired of hearing this conversation, because it's not just a conversation, it's a reality. Over 1 million people tuned in last night to listen to Bernie Sanders talk his noise. And that should let you know I'm not really concerned about the popularity of Bernie Sanders as much as the importance of the message. In between everything else that we discuss, all the breaking news, all the underlying issues, at the core of so much that's happening is income inequality and the inability of Americans to get ahead. Take a listen real quick to one more clip of Bernie Sanders, and then we'll listen to a clip of Elizabeth Warren.
Tonight we're going to talk about income and wealth inequality and what it means morally and economically when 3 people in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of America. When the top 1%, when the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%.
Picking up where Bernie left off, and that is, look at all the data right now about inequality in America, inequality in wealth, inequality in income. But I want to reframe this a little bit. I see this as inequality in opportunity, and that is one of the most corrosive parts about what's happening and what's gone wrong over a generation. And I look at this very, very personally. I'm somebody who grew up in a paycheck-to-paycheck family. We had our ups, we had our downs. My daddy ended up as a janitor. My mom ended up working a minimum wage job at Sears. I wanted to be a public school teacher, and that meant you had to get a college degree. And I had a lot of bumps along the way, but the bottom line was I got a chance to graduate from college because of a commuter college that cost $50 a semester.
I simply can't even imagine a time when something cost anything. I can barely get a tank of gas for $50 now. And you mean to tell me it costs $50 to go to school? You know, to put into perspective there, I think we forget that it hasn't always been this way. And we become accustomed, because we're resilient people, humans are, we're resilient, and we've become accustomed to living in these difficult times where the price of everything is so exorbitant, and the cost of going to college is going to leave you with a burden of debt that you probably won't be able to pay, but you adjust. Right? Gas is more expensive than what you can afford to put in your gas tank, but you adjust. Right? Rent is ridiculously high, particularly if you're in urban centers, but you adjust. We forget that there was a time when you didn't have to live paycheck to paycheck if you simply had a decent job, like in her description, she says, like being a janitor or an employee at Sears. But today you can be working with 3 degrees and living paycheck to paycheck, but we are resilient people and we adjust. And I think in our resiliency, we have forgotten that there was a time where you didn't have to work this hard. And it's not working hard in the meritocratic sense, saying that if you just work a little bit harder, you could do better. No, it's working ourselves to the bone. Dead tired, people dying because of fatigue and the inability to take care of themselves because we adjust to our surroundings and our situation. And the way that the top 1% has been able to fund their success is not only with raising prices, but increasing efficiency from you and I. We work harder, we work faster, we work more efficient, but we don't get the reward for those increases. And so we adjust. And we have adjusted ourselves into being a society that works hard but doesn't get paid. The majority of us. Some people listening, you may think, well, I don't really work that hard and I make good money. Congratulations to you. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show. But for the rest of us, I mean, we are dog tired at the end of the day and we are barely getting by. And there's nothing that we can get for $50 that's meaningful. We can't pay a bill. Our gas bill is higher than $50 a month, let alone a semester. It's hard to remember those times because most of us haven't lived in those times. Those times started shifting very dramatically, particularly with the wave of neoliberalism that was brought in significantly by Ronald Reagan. And so we adjusted to this world.
I grew up in America a generation ago where a kid who was willing to work hard could basically get an advanced education on a part-time waitressing job instead of having to take on debt to do it. Now, that doesn't happen by magic. It happens because of decisions that we make together, that we make in government to invest in educating our children. And I think the problem we have right now in America, every time I listen to these numbers, I think about them in terms of all of the kids who've been cut out of the game before they were 5 years old, all the kids who were cut out of the game before they were 15 years old, all the folks who were cut out of the game before they were 25, all the people who had just one slim little chance to make it through, and if they veered off that path at all, that they lost it entirely.
Well, if she isn't speaking the gospel truth there, I don't know what is, because most of us, as we adjust, no matter how strong we are, as we adjust to living in this society where going paycheck to paycheck is the norm, even though you're working 50, 60 hours a week, Most of us have adjusted, but even though we're strong, if we mess up one time, it's enough to set us back for an entire year. And think about children born into those environments. I was having a conversation with my friend, Professor Matt Sinkowitz, who's going to drop by the show next week. But we were just comparing, like, growing up, it takes an entire generation just to properly poise the next generation. Like the things I described to him about my life and how hard I work and the hours that I put in and the risks that I take in order to try to get ahead and get further than my parents. It reminds him of his father, who went through the same type of struggle and hardships and working 3 jobs and all the things that I do now currently. And that's what set him up to be a college professor. And what does that say to us? That we have to work our entire lives just to give our children a chance. And if we slip up, not only do we mess it up for us, but we mess it up for our children. Some of us can't afford to make a $200 mistake, let alone be frivolous with $200. Sometimes $200 is the difference between surviving and completely going under. Living on the edge, because we've adjusted to living on the edge. If I could draw a meaningless comparison of how I sleep at night. Like, eventually I just learned how literally to sleep on the edge of the bed, where I'm quite literally, my arms and knees are hanging over the edge. And that's just where I like to sleep, because I've adjusted to living there. But if I make one mistake at night, I will have a very funny story to tell you the next day. But in reality, most of us, if we've been living on the edge that long and we make a mistake, it's nothing funny, comical, or even it's a tragic situation that most Americans live in. And that's why you had 1 million people show up to listen to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren talk about these things last night, because that's exactly where most of America is. And how do we change it? Well, we have to do more than talking. We have to get policies. And to get policies, we have to get politicians. And to get politicians, we have to get active, organize. And to get organized, you have to have someone pushing you and continuously telling you to organize. And that's what I'm doing. Get out there. Let's organize. Let's get the people elected that can actually change these things. You become the person that can actually change this thing. Run for office. And let's do this. Because I'm tired of sleeping on the edge. And I know you're tired of living on the edge. Go to patreon.com, support our fundraiser. We're trying to raise money to get rental facilities for our video production, so we can get video back in action. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Thanks to all of my current patrons. Stick with us. Thanks to all the current patrons that increased how much they give. You're the MVPs. And thanks to all of the new patrons. Welcome aboard. I will be doing a bonus show today. Be sure to go to patreon.com/the BPD show to get access to the bonus content. Love all of you. Have a wonderful day. Oh, by the way, you absolutely do want to get today's bonus show, because I'm going to tell you about how shook I was last night. Shook meaning scared. With these tornadoes in Atlanta. I'm ready to move back to Boston. Give me a snowstorm blizzard any day of the week. But I'll tell you more about it on the bonus show. See you in a bit.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.